Welcome back to the BCA podcast. And today we have a special guest with Danielle. I always mess up names. Atkins, right?
Atkins, yes, with a
Atkins.
T,
Okay.
not a D.
Not a D. Kind of like the diet, right? Isn't there an Atkins diet?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I always specify because so many of my letters I'll get back with ADKINS. And so I'm like Atkins, ATKINS.
Yeah. I think our pronunciation up here is pretty lazy. From I'm outside of Rochester and Buffalo, and we kind of just slur it all in there. But so, anyways, Danielle is a forester and land sales specialist. Did I get that right?
You did. Good job.
And Danielle has just a unique, a very unique way of doing her consults and doing her social media. And I am super excited to have you on the show and to hear from you. So, Danielle, can you kind of give us a little bit of your background? Like, how did you get involved in the outdoors? Did you go to school for this, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for asking me on here. It's a pleasure and it's an honor anytime being asked just to share what I do. So I appreciate that. So a little bit about my background is it's pretty much all the nevers that I always said I would ever do. God's definitely told me, joke's on you. And so I did not grow up in the country or the rural life. My dad was Army. And so I don't really have an accent for anything. And that's very evident down here. I live in southern Georgia, and they all say, "You ain't from around here. Where are you from?" And I got to say a little bit of everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. But I graduated high school from Augusta, Georgia, and I went to the University of Georgia originally to be a pharmacist. And then I realized I really suck at chemistry. So that was not going to work out. And through some stumbling around, I eventually did find the forestry school, and my bachelor's is in wildlife sciences. And again, I originally went there with the idea that I would be a science teacher, kind of like the Miss Frizzle from Magic School Bus was the vibe I was going for, and with a little bit of Steve Irwin twist in there. And all of my wildlife professors also recognized I was not an above average student. It's just
You're
like
not
I
selling
understand.
yourself very well.
I'm not well, and I want to emphasize this point because I think a lot of folks, especially after you talk with me, you get with me, and you kind of have a lot of assumptions of what type of background I came from. I had a below 2.5 GPA because I'm not a good test taker. I'm not good at memorizing scientific names, especially, which was very, very prevalent for the wildlife degree. But I did land an internship at Disney's Animal Kingdom. But at the same time, I was really involved with the Forestry Club and really started recognizing that forestry is not just beards, flannel, lumberjacks, loggers, which I love loggers, but that was my stereotype. And
Mhm.
so the more involved I got with the Forestry Club, the more I recognized I wanted more of that career. So I turned down Disney and I did a master's of forest resources. And I'm emphasize the poor GPA of undergrad too, because again, to go to grad school, a lot of folks have this assumption you have to be stellar, right? You have to
Mm.
GPA above everything. And again, that's not the case. I had great networking, really good connections. So they knew I'm not dumb. I'm just not a good test taker, right?
Right.
On paper, I'm nothing to brag about, but I go above and beyond in my work ethic. I try really hard. I communicate. I try to apply what I learn. I just can't test well. And so I had to have a couple extra letters to get me into grad school. I did get the minimum, GRE that you have to get. I studied really hard for that. And I was able, and I did much better in forestry school. It was a much more natural fit for me. I had, I think, a
Yeah.
4.8 in grad school, which also comes with maturing and recognizing, like, the operations of how that implies. And I did a lot of networking. That's a long way to say, like, all of those things, I again still had preconceptions of what I would do. I said I would never go into consulting. I would be career driven, that I would never work for the government. And I would stay, I really wanted to stay with the company like long term, a lot of loyalty aspects to it. And I
Yeah.
have, like, all of those are thrown out the window already. I
It's
work for government.
funny how God does that, right?
All of my nevers have always come true, which is absolutely ridiculous because I can vividly, one of my mentors, I intentionally turned down his class. It was consulting in business in forestry. And I was like, no, I'm not ever going to be a consultant. I don't want to. That's too stressful. And he's like, well, it'd be good for you. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. And so I did take the class, and now obviously I'm a consultant. So again, jokes on me. That class would have been helpful, maybe. But I did work for the state for 4.5 years. I met my husband through forestry school. He had his bachelor's in fisheries, and then also did the forestry grad school as well, because he realized there's not much career in fisheries outside of research or being a captain. Which he wouldn't mind the captain aspect, but it's a little challenging to make
Yeah.
a career
Yeah.
out of it
Yeah.
sometimes. And so he became a forester. I became a forester. He got the job first, so I followed him down to South Georgia, and that's basically how I ended up working for the state. And it was still one of those desperate meets desperate, which my supervisor at that time joked about too, that he was also desperate for anybody to accept the job, and I was desperate for any type of job. And that he didn't really want to hire me because of some of my experiences in the past. He had some preconceptions, and which we joke about, because he ended up really liking me. We had a great work relationship, where I could count on him and he could count on me, and we worked really well together for several years. He's probably one of the best bosses I've had, and I really appreciate him.
Hmm.
But it was just another lesson in don't make assumptions, right? And then I started having kids. We got married, my husband and I, in 2014, and we started having kids in 2018. And I realized I didn't want to work full time in the traditional, like 8 to 5, 9 to 5 type of job. So I left the state, which is again one of those nevers I didn't say I wanted to do. I always wanted a career up until I started having kids. Even when I was pregnant, I always had the intention on coming back.
Yeah.
And then after I had my first son, William, I realized I didn't want to. And so, and a few work things weren't going so well. I had a different boss, and it just wasn't going that great. And I do appreciate, I was really angry at the time, but I appreciate, because I recognized that was also God's way of forcing me out, because he knew I wouldn't leave unless I
Right.
had different situations. So I left there. I worked for a couple nonprofits. Then I started my own company in 2020. And then the last fall of 2024, God told me to close down that business, which was
Hmm.
again another never. I never intended to become a real estate agent. I've actually been asked several times during my tenure working with landed ladies, where my expertise was helping women specifically online on how to manage their family forest lands. I had a special skill set, insights. Most of my audience were widows. And so over 5 years, I really cultivated, how do you talk with women, first of all, and then how do you talk with widows? What do they need to understand, since forestry is a male dominated industry,
Yeah.
and not every person is trying to take advantage of you, but men and women do have very different communication styles. And so I usually talked a lot about that, introducing the jargon, and how helping them how to get clarification, because you have the men and women dynamics, and then you have forester dynamics, which,
Yeah.
most of us foresters become it because we don't want to be around people.
Yeah.
So our communication skills aren't the best. And so I would help them, like, how do you get your forester to open up to you a little bit better? Because he's probably assuming you understand when you're not asking questions.
Yeah.
But then I closed that down in the fall, and literally 15 minutes after I announced that I was closing, my brokerage that I'm with now called me up and asked if I wanted to be a real estate agent. I didn't tell him yes. It took about 3 months for me to decide if I wanted to, because I wanted to pray over it, reflect over it. I didn't just want to jump into the next thing.
Yeah.
But it felt right. They're a Christian based brokerage, which I really appreciate. They have scriptures, like the foundation for everything that they do in the company. And then they also homeschool. So
Mhm.
that alignment worked really well with my values as well. Anyways, I've talked a little too much now. I'm going to throw it back to you.
No, nobody wants to listen to me. I'm on this thing every week and try and talk less and less. So that's um, your master's. Did you do that at Georgia as well?
I did, yes.
Okay. Wow. That's really being in New York. We're pretty. I don't know. I feel isolated. Like, I know the school that my kids went through. They went through ESF at Syracuse, and they both went through. Two of my four went through the forest ranger school up in the Adirondacks. But I don't ever think of other schools that because all we hear about is, oh, this is the greatest school ever, and you forget that
I hear
there's.
the same thing.
So you now have 3 children?
I do. My oldest is 7, my middle is 6, and then my youngest is 4.
Wow.
So they're all less than 2 years apart, give or take.
Yeah. So you have your hands full.
I do, but I decided a while ago, I always wanted 3, and I also knew once I left diapers, I would not come back to diapers. I was
Yep.
self-aware enough of that. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
bam, bam, bam.
And you're doing homeschooling with them.
Yes,
So
yes.
you are still getting that teacher thing in there.
A little bit. Not in the way that I had thought,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess I am still got it in there. I hadn't thought about that.
Are you adding the Steve Irwin piece to it? Are they outside with
Um,
you?
my son actually complains about the bugs a lot. So we go outside when it's not 110 or the perfect season where the sand gnats like to bite us down here.
Yeah.
But now that we just cut the trail systems. I know you had watched the videos this
Yep.
past spring, and now that we have those, he is a lot more excited to be in the woods. Before, our woods weren't really that accessible.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't excited about just exploring, getting eaten by mosquitoes. But now that we have
Right.
trails, it makes it a little bit easier for him. And he's picturing like where he's going to put his forts and his wildflowers and all of this. So
And they
I'm
can
trying to incorporate it.
they can identify poison ivy and
Yes.
poison. Yes.
Yes, we learned that lesson. Not the super hard way. They did touch it, but they luckily we were able to wash it off real fast because they recognized that they had touched something they shouldn't have real
Yeah.
quickly. But he can identify a few things. Although he keeps calling some things wrong, like he calls sweet gum the star tree, and I keep correcting him. He doesn't need to do that. He said, "Well, it looks like a star." And I said, "Yes, but when you say that, I'm thinking something else. You need to say it by the right name at
Right.
least." He's
Right.
like, He's 7, of course, so, he knows it all.
Wait till he gets into the Latin and the genus and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, and then he's
um,
gonna blow my mind 'cause I already told you I did not do well on that.
when I watched that video that you posted recently on plant identification and why it's important, um, I thought you were going in a different direction because when we have done land consulting, one of the things that we tell folks is that you need to each year, if you can, try and learn to identify 5 different plants and 5 different trees on your property, just so that you're getting to know your property and you can be able to point those out. So that was the direction I thought you were going. And then you flipped the switch and I was like, yeah, it's probably more important that you can identify poison
Learn what
ivy.
you shouldn't touch. I don't
Right.
care if you can say now, granted, it is important, obviously, and I have talked about that in the past, like, when I, had my business and my programs, I would talk about
Hmm.
if you can learn to identify some things and talk to through that with your forester, it really shares a lot about the soil type and the habitat type. It really does tell a whole story of its own. But right now, like especially since my target is more of those new buyers, I'm like,
Yep.
hey, let's learn not to touch poison ivy.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you selling homes? Are you land? What is your
I'm
focus?
primarily land.
Okay.
I mean, if homes are on land, but I'm open to that. Right now, I've mostly been dealing with small acreage, small to medium acreage. I'm talking to a few folks, buyers specifically, that are looking for more of that medium to large acreage. But the forestry side just makes a lot more sense with land, and that's how I kind of did come on board with the brokerage.
Yep.
Was I really don't have a desire for residential homes. I've learned
Right.
not to say never, but I do not have that desire. I kind of want to stick with my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you break down small, medium, large properties, like an acreage size?
Yeah. So in forestry, small, medium, large was under 40 is small. That 40 to 50 to about 250 is medium. And then above 250 is more the average Joe large, right? Now, if I'm talking to like more family businesses, the numbers are a little different. But for the average family Joe, those are my numbers. For
Sure.
real estate or land sales, my small is 2 to 12.
Mm,
Medium is like 15 to 25. And then, well, I guess 15 to to 60. I'll bump it up there. And then large would be over 60 right now.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't have a ton where I'm talking with the homesteading trend, the home sites, people trying to get away from their half acre homes are really, really popular. And so I'm getting a lot more of those. I want space, elbow room, but they don't necessarily want the forest management, or they can't afford. They
Right.
don't want to bite that off because a lot of them do want to build their own home. So they can only set so much for the land base because they want to build that home or put a home on it. And so I've sold a just under 12 acres. I have a 12 acres right now under contract. I have another 11 acres, although only about 5 of that is land. The other 5 is lake. And then I have several buyers that are looking for that 3 to 12. I have about 3 different buyers looking for that right now. And then I have a couple buyers that are looking for 50 to like 100, and another one that's 200 plus.
Yeah. And the land prices have just kind of skyrocketed, at least in our area.
Mm-hmm.
We bought 20 acres in 2017 and basically stole it. I mean, it had been on the market since the 80s, but people didn't know that it was on the market. It was an old gas holding. They didn't have wells on it. It was like a collection site for a lot of little wells. And they wanted 100,000. And my wife and I walked it and prayed and said, well, let's do something stupid. I said, let's offer 60. And she goes, if we're going to be stupid, let's offer 50. We did. And they said, well, we can't do less than 57. So we felt like that was reasonable. Well, then we get in and find out there is a well of potable water, 128-foot deep well, had 6 poles and electricity running into the site. Like all of these things that had we known, probably we would have paid the full 100,000 for it. But we've watched the property around us just go up and up and up. You can't hardly get an acre of land for 4,000 now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty wild. And I think the homesteading thing that has just exploded, especially since COVID. That's
Mm-hmm.
we bought it for hunting. We wanted to manage our own property, build a cabin on it, and almost immediately it exploded into, okay, we're going to do apple trees. We've got gardens on there. We have a whole bunch of chickens. We're doing started bees last year. We're doing pigs this year. Like it just keeps rolling, um, and trying to think of ways, how do we steward the land and care for the land, but also how do we use that in terms of our own food sourcing, wanting to be more involved with where we source our food and that kind of thing. So it's been a fun journey for us, but we're seeing a lot of that around us where people are jumping into this homesteading more and more. And I don't know if you're seeing that in Georgia as well, but
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of folks, they don't always use the word homesteading. I usually use it because it's the most stereotypical, like visual you can get. But I think, I mean, just at least one conversation a day is around that. They'll usually say a home site, and they're like, but we want chickens and we would like to have maybe a few fruit trees. They mean they want their own little
yeah,
homestead. They
yeah,
may not ready to do the full commitment of the like Instagram, TikTok homesteading video trends. But they want to have that space. They don't necessarily want to be in the HOA. They want to be able to utilize it and get a little bit more back to natural. And I think especially these days, a lot of folks want to go more sourcing their own food to
right,
some degree, and just getting that connection back to nature in some form or fashion.
yeah. And I think that's a good thing, personally. And I think there's a natural tie that can come with that to, um, to who we are as followers of Jesus, right? So you could tie it into all kinds of scripture, and I think that's one of the things that you have done really well on your social media posts. Is there was one this week about the land was meant to be worked. I mean, that's awesome. That's exactly what I think people need to hear as they step into that homesteading world.
Yeah, because a lot of times too, especially depending on what type of background they're coming from, they want it, but they don't necessarily understand what does work look like, right? They don't understand the annual, the daily, the weekly maintenance that comes with it. And so I try to be very transparent in the way that I talk with them of like, well, what do you want? And again, this was something I did a lot with my programs, talking about like there's passive work and active work, and neither is better than the other. But that intentional decision to work, planting loblolly pines, that's still working the ground. You just don't have to do something every
Right.
year.
Right.
Planting longleaf pines, you are pretty much signing up to burn it every 2 years. So you need to accept that responsibility and you make those decisions. Apple orchards, pigs, bees, all of them have different management needs.
Yeah.
And so making those intentional decisions, I don't have livestock because I'm not ready for that commitment. We have chickens. I can handle chickens.
Right.
And we have a hardwood forest. I would love to get into bees. But I'm self aware enough that with 3 kids that I'm homeschooling, especially, and
Yeah.
having a real estate side, I need to choose my work
Yeah. Yeah.
in a manner that I feel like I can sustain. Um, while being good stewards, making wise decisions. Like we do herbicide spray, but why are we were sticking to the trail systems and the invasives because I want those trail systems to be able to utilize.
Yep.
I don't want them growing up and fighting those palmettos and having to bush hog, 5 times a year
Oof.
just to keep the trails open. So I'm using chemical, but we're using chemical here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people just don't understand what does work look like. They assume it's, on either side of the spectrum, either
Right.
great or you're doing it wrong and all of that. And so I really try to show that God shows so many different instructions of how work can look.
Yep.
But if Adam was meant to work the Garden of Eden, letting nature go and just say, let nature be nature, isn't the intention,
No.
right? Nature
No.
does a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we weren't meant to work it.
Yeah. My daughter is seeing that working with the state, and with the county forests is that so much of it is hands off. They don't, we're not going to manage it. And so we have this, it's almost a monoculture forest, and we have it's all age, same age, forests, and they're just not, and state agencies, they're
I
hard to
do.
move on anything. And
I do
unless
very much.
unless they can get a dollar out of it, then they're not, they don't want to put dollars in, and that's been difficult. I have these conversations with her and say, "There's no way I could ever work for a state agency." Of course,
Don't
now
say never.
I was going to say now I'm scared to say. I never thought I'd be a pastor either, but here I am.
The
So
joke's on you.
that's right.
You're going to
Uh,
be a pastor that works for the state if you're not careful.
oh gosh, could you imagine? Um, but that idea of, I think, the incremental steps. We had these chickens and the bees, and we thought, we're ready to take on something else. Um, we hemmed and hawed between a beef cow, or maybe goats, and pigs, and we wanted to choose one. And the cows are like 2 years to finish. And I'm like, well, what if we get into this 6 months and we realize we can't do it, or we don't like to do it? Now we still
Mhm.
got 18 months to go. And so what it came down to was, pigs are fairly easy. The meat yield is pretty high, and we felt like, okay, that's a good next incremental step. As opposed to,
Mhm.
we're gonna buy a herd of cattle. We've never, haven't stepped foot in a paddock before. We don't know anything about cows, and um, so I think there's room to grow. There is, you can do it incrementally, which has
I think
been,
it's wise to, because
yeah,
otherwise you have too much, then you can chew, you get discouraged, and then you just quit. Or
yeah.
worse, you neglect it and nothing thrives at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. This is way off in left field, but have you heard of the Little Red Schoolhouse? They,
Well, okay. I There's a little red schoolhouse on the island, and it's a little daycare school. So I don't know if we're thinking of the same little red
we're,
schoolhouse.
we're not. It's like a homeschool curriculum kind of thing,
Okay,
and
no, not necessarily. There's so many
it's
homeschool curriculums,
yeah,
though.
and this is very much focused on outdoors. Like, kids are being outdoors, helping with the animals, learning about livestock, learning about forestry, that kind of thing. Um, just I know we have some folks in our church that are using it, and have come to visit our homestead. So it's been neat to see those kids participate in caring for chickens and hopefully pigs in the future. So
I just wrote that down so I can look it up later. Yeah, I have my kids. We raised chicks last year. 3 of them
mm.
turned out to be roosters. We just discovered though, because I'm not good at sexing chicks, which is real unfortunate because I thought that they were going to be chickens because they waited a little bit to start crowing, but now they all like crowing and they're a little aggressive. So we got to get rid of, and we already have a rooster, so we got to get rid of 3 roosters. So they have to make the decision. Which our chickens really, they're not meat chickens, they're just egg chickens because I
Hmm.
do not have the patience to feather a chicken. I'd rather just pay $10 for chicken.
Yeah.
Um, that's just me though. And so yeah, they're having to make some of those hard decisions, but it's important, and we've had some chickens die and learning about like the life cycle.
Yeah.
It's really hard lessons, but I think it's really important for them to understand. And we always connect it back to faith because, I mean, my oldest son, especially, he'll ask questions all the time, like, well, why would God let this happen? Um, and we'll pray for our animals. So fun little story, side note. It's not about chickens. It's about his fish. He's got little fish, little tetra fish in his room, and one of them started like swimming up and down vertically. And I'm not a fish guy, my husband is, so keep that in mind when I use really terrible jargon. But they're not supposed to swim vertically, right? They're supposed to swim horizontally. Vertically means obviously something's wrong. So I Googled it and talked about the swim bladder thing being wrong. And we're like, oh my goodness, he's not going to make it. So we pulled his little Tetra out. We put him in a little bowl with a bubbler and trying to keep him alive. And my son's real upset. He's like, have I been overfeeding him? What did I do wrong? He's taking it really personally because bless his heart, trying to establish some fish. Again, I'm not good at fish. And so I've killed like so many of them on establishment because I wasn't acclimating them right. And so we're sitting there and I'm like, okay, let's pray for Jesus to heal our fish. And my son says something along the lines like, well, with so much going on, Jesus is not going to care about my little fish.
Oh,
Yeah, so it was heartbreaking, right? And so I was like, well, that's not true. He does care. I was like, he may not heal the fish, right? He may not. That doesn't mean he doesn't care. So we're praying over this little tetra fish, little guy. Um, and he seems to be doing better. He's still swimming like kind of vertically. We look and it seems like his tail, I don't know what's going on, but his tail is like kind of ripped a little bit. So he's not going to swim horizontally. But we kept him in the separate bubbler for about 4 days. And then I was like, we can't just keep him in here on the kitchen counter. It's just not going to work out. It's sink or swim fish, you know. But we prayed every day together about this fish and we put him back in there. The fish made it another month and a half. And
wow.
then he did finally die. But then my son said something like, well, it was really nice of Jesus to give me another month. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
yeah, especially since we really did think the fish was going to die that weekend. Because, that is kind of a
yeah.
telltale, like his bladder's off, his whatever. And I think there was something else going on. But the fact that he got a whole nother month was like
Wow.
huge. And so we had a funeral for our fish, of course, and buried him next to the pond because William thought that he would like to be buried next to some pond water. That would be nice. And it was still hard for him, but still was seeing him kind of like see. And that's what I prayed for. I said, for Jesus to heal this fish, to show William that you care about the small things to us,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Boy.
I think we use a lot of those lessons in our land management, in our homesteading, whether it's pigs or bees. So many things go wrong, and we have to rely so much on God and nature. Especially down in my neck of the woods, we have hurricanes every
Mm.
single year, right? I usually don't pay attention to which hurricanes are coming up. I know one's coming up on my side of the woods, but I don't know if it's going to hit us. I'll find out like 3 days before. I'll pay attention. Like, are you actually going to hit or not? I'll figure it out then. But see, last year we had Helen, and then 2 years before that there was Michael, and they just devastated, complete forest areas. Like our whole industry down here has been like rocked over the last 3,
Mm.
4, 5 years. I don't remember the years anymore. And so it's like, how do you have faith to keep managing and investing and doing the work when things don't seem to go right. And those are hard questions that I don't really know how to answer
I
most of
was
the
going to ask if you have an answer. That
I mean, not really. The only thing I have as I've like walked more um, is recognizing how God does use people come together better with
yeah,
tragedy
yeah.
than we do with success. Which I have a 5:30 a.m. Bible study. You're welcome to join if you want. It's free to anybody who wants to. I post the link on LinkedIn. It's a whole bunch of foresters who get up and we just read a chapter of the Bible. We're going through Hosea right now, but I've done it for 2 years at this point.
Wow.
Um, and doing that has, I guess, helped open my eyes to the connection to nature, but more so to the accepting of when things don't go to plan
Mhm.
in nature and
Yeah.
management and all of that.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a saying that is, if you have livestock, you're going to have dead stock, and I think there's some truth to that even in the forestry industry. We have, um, up here, the emerald ash borer has just destroyed our ash trees,
Mhm.
and we're now dealing with the woolly adengian. I can't say that. Well, you know what
I
I'm.
can't either, so we're good.
And you wonder, you're like, boy, we've been managing and managing this stuff to the best of our ability, doing it the way we think God wants us to do it, and then something comes through like a hurricane or a disease and just wipes out that effort. And how do you deal with that disappointment? How do you say, okay, God, what are you doing here? And I think that's a question people ask in life. Like, why did my sister pass away? Why did this happen? Um, my younger son just bought a house, but that whole process of putting in an offer and then having somebody offer 75,000 above his offer. He went through a number of disappointments and finally got a house that we felt like, this is perfect. The
Mhm.
offer was just accepted, and he said, Dad, I've been praying for a home. I want a house. He said, but more than that, I wanted a testimony. I wanted to be able to say, I got this house, and it's not because I offered more money. It was because God did something. And
Mhm.
his offer was actually less than the highest offer. But the guy who was selling the house said, there's just something different about this guy. And we still haven't ever met the owner, but he said, I just felt like there was something different and I wanted him to have the house. Like, oh,
Oh, that's cool.
so somewheres, even in the midst of storms, even in the midst of disappointment,
Mhm.
we have to recognize that God is still at work. He's still in the midst of the storm. He's not sending us through alone. He's walking through it with us. And I think that story of your son, that's something he'll remember. And that's for you as a parent, that's got to pull on the heartstrings too of your, thank you, Lord, that my son is experiencing this, even in the heartbreak of losing his fish. Um,
Yeah.
that's powerful stuff. So
It is. It's definitely touching. I ask him all the time. It's like, basically, do you accept Jesus? Do you want to get baptized? And he's like, oh no, maybe when I'm like 9. Like, okay. My daughter's already accepted and been baptized at 5, which was huge, and I was a bit hesitant, but I felt like that was right for her.
yeah,
She asked a lot of questions, and she really wanted to and I know she doesn't grasp fully, but she seemed to
sure.
have enough of the grasp of it. And she's
Yeah.
has and I think God speaks to her very specially because
Mhm.
even when she was real little, I would call it Elliot wisdoms, and she would just randomly pop out with like the most bizarre statements and then go back to regular conversation. I'm like, okay.
But
It would be like, do you think Jesus still has a beard? Well, I guess we really don't know if he ever had a beard. It's been a really long time since we've seen him. He might have shaved by now. And then and then go back to asking a question about like Dora the Explorer, which is what we
right.
might have been watching. And I was just
How
like,
funny.
what?
What? That is so funny. And I think it's true of all of us. We're all still learning, right? I mean, nobody ever really fully gets it all, and which is great. Like I love the awe and the wonder and the mystery of God, because if I could understand him, then he's not much of a God if I can understand him.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I love coming to those places where I just have to say, I don't know. It's God, there's a mystery there. So
I think you're stronger than I am. I don't I'm a control freak though, and so I struggle with the awe and not no, I'm getting better with it,
mhm.
right? But I do still struggle a lot. I have that tug of war of like wanting to understand everything before I take any steps or any actions,
Yeah,
which I think is perfect for that forester, right? Because every management decision you're doing now is a step in faith of an expectation,
yeah.
maybe, hopefully, in 30 years, right? But like when I got called to close my business, I was absolutely devastated. I'm not going to
Mm,
lie. So, but I can see God's hand. I knew it was God. So about 50 days before that, right? I woke up and I had my coworker. She was like my admin, my operations girl, and I told her, I said, "Hey, Vic, we are going to do a new program for 40 days. I feel called. We're going to do something for 40 days, and we're going to give everything away for free." And she said, "Excuse me," and I said, "Yeah." I feel called that and we called it the Radical Academy. And I was like, this is what I feel called to do. It doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't make sense, but for 40 days, we're going to give everything away. And I told her, I said, I feel like it's in between the whole like Peter walking out on the water and Abraham and Isaac. I was like, but I felt more like Abraham and Isaac. And at the top, something's going to happen at the end of the 40 days, and like we're going to get the sheep. And she's like, okay. I was like, just go with me. She was great. She was a great sport. But on day 40, literally day 40, I woke up with that close down the business, and I
oh.
was devastated. I was like, excuse me, this is not pulling out the sheep, sir. And so I wrestled for about 3 days. I fought with it and I cried and whatnot because I was absolutely devastated because I did not want to do that. But everything made sense logically too. Like so many of my programs I did not get signups for that I normally would have had, a good dozen signups for already, but I had zero, right? And
Uh,
so clearly that was also God showing me. And I was making excuses of like, oh, I'm just not marketing right. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm not showing the value enough. And to be fair too, it is a hard program because my audience is primarily widows. So you kind of got to have something
yeah.
terrible usually, and they have to go through the grief process. And so I get it. But so I closed down my business. I had one more like conventional booth fair I was doing at the Farm Bureau, and I was like, I'm just going to give everything away. I'm closing down the business. I had announced I'm closing down the business. I'm just going to. I love that convention because they have great fried peanut butter sandwiches, and I took my son there, and we talked about agriculture. I was like, I'm just going to give everything away and let them know I'm closing down the business. And I had just finished writing my 40-day land steward because I felt God put on my heart too to finish the book I had like started 2 years prior. And I was like, okay. So I had that and I was like testing the market. But what was neat about through all of that was William was with me, right? And he's like, well, why are you closing the business? I said, well, God told me to. And he was like, well, why? I was like, I don't know, buddy. I really don't know. He's like, but you're doing it because God told you to. And I was like, yeah, I'm closing it because God told me to. And so it's been really neat to see him kind of one fully accept that, but also I'm not saying I'm a good role model because I still like do a lot of wrong, steps, but him, I hope, seeing me close a business that I did love, right?
Yes.
And take the steps of obedience, even in this new real estate world, and shifting these gears and watching me be new at something that I'd never done before, I hope is demonstrating something to him about obedience to God that he'll be able to copy. I was going to
Yeah.
say another word, but I can't pronounce the other word. So,
But
emulate,
that's
is that the right word?
what's that? Emulate?
Emulate, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Like to copy?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And I'm a little bit, 53. My kids are all 20s. They do pick up on that stuff. They do. I guarantee. in 10, 15 years, he's going to say, okay, I watched my mom close her business simply because God told her to. That's going to come back up. And that lesson of watching that, um, probably will hit him more and more long term than, sitting him down and having a lecture about how we have to be obedient to God. I mean, it'll be a signpost for him or a marker for him for sure.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah,
so.
man, that's great parenting.
I'm just taking one step in front of the other, but I
Yeah,
shared all that to share. Like, I thought I had God figured out, right? Like the Abraham, Isaac, and I was going to get my sheep. When in reality, it was more so, I feel like, um, it's Luke 5:5, I think, when Peter goes out to catch the fish, and he's there all night, right? And he
hmm,
catches nothing, and he comes back, and this like carpenter guy's like, "Hey, let's go fishing again." And Peter's like, "I'm a fisherman, no." He's like, "Well, throw your net over there." And he's like, "I've been out here all night." But then he says, "Because you say so, right? At your word, I will do what you say." And of course, he gets the whole net of fish, and he recognizes everything. But I really love that scene. And that scene has been a lot of my motto for this year. At your word. I got a lot of clothing that embroidered on it. This one's not it. This is let them hear. But um, at your works, I feel like my tug of war and a lot of our tug of war is so much with the logical and the experts, right? That we
yeah,
have a hard time being obedient to God because God's what he wants us to do makes no sense
yeah,
at all. And that can be true buying land, selling land, getting pigs, whatever it might be, may not make logical sense in the moment. But if that's what God's telling you to do, right?
yep, yep,
We just have to stop fighting ourselves, which I do struggle with a ton.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. Peter walks away from all of that massive catch of fish in order just to
Yeah.
follow Jesus. That's incredible.
Yes. It would be hard for me to walk away from that massive catch of fish.
But you did. You walked away from your business, and so in some ways it was a successful
It
business,
was
and you were
it wasn't a
obedient.
massive catch of fish in the
No.
way that I think I would. I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. Not in the way was having a lot of failings, right?
Mhm.
I wasn't getting the signups. Like, I think if I and I had talked to another mentor because I was like, do I keep doing this? I think I was trying to do the symposium. I was going to keep doing the academy, and then I heard God say, "Did I stutter?" And I was like, "Okay, no academy." But I was like, "But I'll keep the symposium. The symposium will be my last farewell hoorah, right?" And he never said, "Did I stutter again?" Which I recognize now. God doesn't need to tell you twice, right? And
Right.
he was, thankful enough. He told me that twice, but I had like been like, "Oh, he's just talking about the academy. I could still keep this thing over here, and that'll be my farewell." And yet, I still wasn't getting signups, right? Like by the time in January, I normally had 20 plus people signed up, and I think I had two families because they were spouses. And I was like, oh my goodness, it takes a ton of money for me to throw this thing on. My sponsors, I was concerned that they would feel like it was a waste, but more so, it also wasn't going to have the impact for the people. They're going to
Right.
go, and it's not the same dynamics that my past symposiums have been, where I've had 50 plus people. And so I was talking to my mentor. I was like, what do I do? Do I close it down? It's getting close. I need to make this decision. And she said something along the lines, it reminds me of like the catch of fish, and I think that's why I disagree that it wasn't my catch of fish.
Yeah.
She said, if it was successful, like if it was a huge blowout like I wanted it to be, would I have continued to walk away, or would I have
Man.
kept strings? And I said, I think you're right. I would have seen it as a sign to keep going, right? And so
Yeah.
God knows me well enough to know I
Yeah.
struggle walking away from that catch of fish, right?
That's good. That's a great insight. Yeah.
And so I had to eat some humble pie and announce to everybody afterwards that I was closing down the symposium, and I, refunded my folks, it cost me a lot because one of my women, I think she was flying out from your area. She was flying in from like New York or Maryland or
Hmm.
something like that. She was flying in. So I refunded her airfare because I felt terrible,
Wow.
because she had made a huge commitment with her. It was her and her mom was going to come actually. And so it cost me a lot too. But if I would have listened to begin with, she would have never booked her hotel or
Yep.
her airfare. And so it just reminds me, delayed obedience is still disobedience, and it costs you more to delay than to be obedient at once. But it is hard.
Wow. Wow. That is, man, that's wisdom right there. Delayed obedience is still disobedience, and it costs you more to wait or to delay.
But
That's
you only learn after paying thousands
yeah,
of dollars.
yeah. That's really good wisdom.
Yeah.
That's thank you. Um, boy, that's worth the price right there of doing the podcast. It's good
You got
stuff.
what you paid for.
That's right. Um, so are you in your real estate role now?
Mhm.
Are you still doing any kind of forestry consulting as part of that?
Yes. And so I
Okay.
have gone back to actually doing on the ground land management. So in my business, I wasn't offering any on the ground management because I wanted to be that third party, unbiased, where
Mhm.
the women, especially again, because they're widows, right? And their fear of being taken advantage of. And I didn't want to give any of that feeling.
Yeah.
So I never offered it because I didn't want them to feel like I was trying to sway them to work for me. And so I have actually started offering that again, land management, consulting, more localized here, which is
Mhm.
nice to be back in the woods some and to bring my son in the woods. And, he gets to see measuring trees. And we recently stocked a pond for one landowner. So he
Mm.
got to help us seine the pond and sample it. He learned he doesn't like walking in cypress duck ponds because there's a lot of like cypress knees and it makes it kind of hard to walk through.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
I don't want to go in that pond again. I said, yeah, buddy, I feel ya. And so I am offering that. It's a small portion because I do with this new role, and that's something with my brokerage. Uh, I don't know. We're all independent contractors, so it's not like, boss per se. But when I agreed to sign up, I told him, I said, I want to make sure my priorities stay right: God,
Yeah.
family, then business, right?
Yep.
And so I don't take on so much. I'm trying really hard not to hustle as much as I probably was hustling when I had my own business, right?
Yeah.
If it comes, it comes. I'm still going to do my general marketing, but I'm not going to let it overtake my life because it's God first, family second, which is homeschooling,
Yep.
and then business.
Wow. That's good. Like you got to have those priorities set,
Mhm.
and you got to create boundaries to be able to stick with those things. A boundary of like, okay, God first means I'm getting up and doing a Bible study at 5:30.
Mhm.
Family first means I'm home doing homeschooling and teaching those lessons that your children are seeing and experiencing just in life. Like having those boundaries instead of running chasing the dollar.
Mhm.
Um, that's good. It's I'm trying to come up with a better adjective than good. That's
It's good.
phenomenal.
I use good a lot too. Excellent, interesting. Those are my
Yeah,
go-to words.
fantastic.
I would say the only thing is it like we say or I say on here, right, on the podcast, and whoever's listening, it makes it sound like I have it very cut and dry. But
Right.
I guess I would also share very transparently the lines get blurred really easily sometimes
Yep.
because of that, for me, that tug of war. That I still have that ambition, that career ambition, right? That's inside of me, even though it's shifted some.
Yeah.
And so I can get very easily sucked into work, 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 work. I love work. My
Yeah.
daughter asked me, she's like, why do you work all the time? I'm on my phone all the time. She's like, why? I'm like, well, I'm checking emails. So I'm not sitting at the computer. I'll be like checking emails on the couch with them and, responding that way or texting clients. I'm like, well, it's work. She's like, well, why are you working? Why do you work so much? And I was like, well, I enjoy work is how I try to phrase it to them. It's not like an obligation. I really do like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I want them to recognize that. But I also recognize when she's saying that, I probably been on my phone a little too much. And it's like a little ego check of like, hey, your lines are starting to get blurred.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
step back.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to check myself, and I don't, we don't have kids at home. Well, I have one in college who's home during the summer now. Um, but even to check myself and saying, okay, a text came in, do I have to respond to it right this second, or can it wait?
Mhm.
And I'm self-diagnosed OCD a little bit when it comes to my phone. I hate any of those red numbers on my
I
phone or
do
red
too.
dots. So I got to clear my. I know my day is done when I've cleared my inbox. Either I've moved everything to a folder, an appropriate folder, or I've answered the question. But it drives my wife nuts. She's got 300 unread emails in her phone, and I don't have any emails in my inbox. But so learning to say, okay, I got to let go of that and be present in this moment, and I'll answer that text later. It drives people crazy. Like, why didn't you respond? Well, I did. It just was within 24 hours. So
Yeah, yeah. I
whatever.
do try to respond to text because I'll just forget. I got mom brain. I will forget that you
Yeah.
even reached out. But I did recently just change my notifications for a lot of my apps that were on there. And same thing, as soon as I notice I get a one or a two or a three, I'm like, I gotta get rid of this. So I just changed so I don't get notified. And I'm hoping, I mean, this is in real time right now, that maybe it'll help some of my behaviors.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
uh, I'll let you
Wow.
know. Give me a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me know because maybe I'll follow suit. So what what would you so when you're managing, if somebody says, Danielle, I want your input on this property that we're buying and habitat management and that kind of thing. Are you managing healthy forests? Are you managing like for, well, I want big deer on my property, or I did a podcast the other day with Cody Altizer and Eric Long about grouse. You micromanage for grouse or Bob White. The deer are going to be there, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I'm always in the this pull and push and pull place where my kids are foresters. My degree was in wildlife management. How do you manage for monetary gain forest wise, and how do you manage for wildlife? Do you have a place where you land, or do you do that according to homeowner or landowner wishes?
Everything comes down to landowner goals, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
I can give recommendations all day long, but if it doesn't match to their goals, they're not going to use me anyways, right?
Right.
And so that is of the utmost importance. Now, does that mean everything else gets neglected? No, but it is important for me to understand, is timber income, your priority? And then if so, then deer hunting, they usually will enjoy that secondary. Or do you not go out there to hunt at all? Well, maybe we can get a hunting lease, or just doing general sustainable, good habitat management. But our forest systems are fairly different too. Like, you're up in the
Yeah.
Northeast, you have a lot more hardwoods. Here in the Southeast, it's very much plantation pine country with either bottomlands or some upland mix. But where I'm at specifically, upland mix usually means live oak savannas, right? Which is a completely different
Hmm.
animal. Or it means a natural forest traditionally, meaning like it's not pine plantation, it was never converted, but they probably aren't doing a whole lot with it necessarily. Or it's wet. So you got your bottomland floodplains, river floodplains, your cypress swamps. But it's still, no matter those, and I share that to say because the pine plantations, it has a completely different management scheme than I know what you're going to recommend for your
Yeah.
forest. So my plant 605 trees, thin at age 13, clear cut at age 27, recommendation is not going to be a good fit for you. But that's what loblolly pine is. And longleaf pine, I
Yeah.
might add an extra 5 years to it, depending on the markets. But that even still depends on their goals, right? If they have a huge adversity to clear cuts, then I'll talk about either smaller patch clear cuts, and by smaller, I still mean 35 acres or so, or doing selective thinning to keep that uneven age rotation. Um, and so I can tap into both mindsets because I think they're both important. But if I don't know what your
Hmm.
ultimate priority is, what are you willing to give and take? Because you can't hit them all evenly. And that's true, as you just pointed
Right.
out, for wildlife. You manage for quail, you're going to have deer, but you're going to have your quail thrive. And so a lot of folks, again, will say, oh, I want all the wildlife. And I'm like, you have to pick one, maybe two, to get it to thrive. Otherwise, nothing is going to thrive. Your
Yeah.
songbird diversity won't thrive, your deer won't thrive, your quail won't thrive, nothing will thrive. So pick something to thrive and you'll have the domino effect. And so it's hard for me to answer because I am very much goal oriented. And if they don't know how to express their goals, I will go through a series of questions and figuring out which words they're saying to see where they're leaning. Because sometimes they may say, I want timber investment or I want money, but they don't mean how a forester means timber goals and timber income,
Right.
right?
Right.
They
Yep.
just want periodic alternative revenue income. They want to support their property taxes. They want deer hunting. They don't care if it's trophy deer hunting. They just want deer to be present. That's
Yeah.
different management right there too. So it's really variable across the board, but I do have to really understand what do you want so I can give you the right recommendations to get to your vision.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be discouraged and disappointed no matter what. Even if it's good, sustainable forest management, if you don't see your vision, you're going to feel discouraged.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's where, as you said, foresters are people who often like to just be in the woods by themselves. But there's a relationship component there where you really have to get to know that landowner and really kind of listen to them and figure out what their goals are, and are those goals achievable. We've run into people who say, well, I want our property to have some trails in it so our kids can scream around on their four-wheelers, and we want to do our 4th of July and Labor Day picnics here, but we also want to shoot a Boone and Crockett class buck. Well, you know what? You're probably not going to be able to do both of those things.
Yeah.
But getting to listen to people and figure out what their goals and their priorities are, and then start working from there, I think is
Hmm.
crucial. That's the crucial spot to begin. So
Yeah, 100%. There's sustainable management, but then there's sustainable management that hits the mark. Because if a
yeah,
landowner doesn't see progress, and which I do have to shape their mind, right, of progress. Like it's not something you're going to see in 1 year. This is a five
right.
year minimum thing, right?
Yep.
But if they don't see any of that working towards what they want, they'll get discouraged, which means they'll most likely either just give up the plan completely or they'll sell it to whatever the next high price is. And maybe it's somebody that'll take it that will steward the land, but it could also be a developer that just pavements it. And
Right.
so I do harp on that a whole lot of making sure you understand what you want when you buy land, if you inherit land, and moving forward with land.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not your land. It's yours for right now. And what you do with it, the decisions you make now are going to impact the future 5, 10, 100 years later. And
Hmm.
so those decisions are crucial now, to reach your goals in a sustainable piece, but they're also going to be crucial going forward for, the next generation too. So
Hmm. What is the Proverbs 13:22 maybe of leave an inheritance to my children's children? It's
yes,
one of the
yes.
Proverbs.
Yep. Yep.
I use that one a lot because I think it resonates. Like you can't just think about what do I want next week. You have to think about what do I want for my children or my grandchildren if they want it, right?
Yeah.
Um, or I also like Proverbs 21:5. Basically planning and profit for due diligence. The people that plan, get profit, and hasty decisions lead to poverty. I forget exactly
Yeah.
how it goes. I copy and paste it from my videos, but that's the consensus of be intentional with a plan and make those decisions. Don't just go willy nilly because if you hear the latest cost share programs giving out money for, this, you're like, oh, I could do that and I could get some money to pay for it. But if it doesn't align to your values, your vision, what you want, you're just wasting money essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good word. A good. I'm really impressed with you. Yeah, like to be raising three kids, to be doing, that have the knowledge that you have, the wisdom that you have. I hope your father is proud of you. If I were, I would be. You have your stuff together, and you are well thought and well spoken. So
Oh, well, thank
thank
you
you
very
for
much.
Yeah. Thank you for jumping on with us. And where can people find you on social media and websites and all that stuff?
Absolutely. So you can find me Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok with at Forestry Agent. Some of them have a dot in the middle, but you should be able to find me.
Okay.
Danielle Atkins. And then you can find me. My website is www.youronlineforester.com.
Okay. Are you still doing the online Forester? Like you were, I think at one point there was an option there to have you go through. It wasn't a boots on the ground. It was like a virtual. Was that something
Or
that I saw?
like coaching clients.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
Um, I I have a few clients still from my Landed Ladies days where I do that. I
Okay.
don't know if I'm necessarily taking clients right now. I think that door is supposed to be shut with Landed Ladies. However, if anyone has questions, I'm always available to try to talk through with you and help you understand either your goals, your objectives. Even if you want to talk out, this is the advice I got. What do you think? With the disclaimer that where you're at and where your listeners are probably listening and where I'm at are completely different animals. And so I would be able to give very general forest management. Does that make sense? But
Yep.
I may not be the right person to give you the specific recommendations of the norms for your areas because my forest management background is the Southeast, which is
Yep.
very different than the Northeast.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. This was a great conversation. I loved hearing your heart, and it went a little different. Like I really thought we were going to talk some forestry stuff, and kind of like like a create a theology for stewardship. Um, but the Lord does things differently, and I just loved. I feel like I got to hear more about your heart and more about your mission, and I'm really, I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you.
I'm really appreciative of the time. So thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You're welcome. God bless, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.